Okay. So it's if you notice we the title of our paper and presentation, we are not only talking about oppression in the urban elite, but what we call as invisible oppression. Just like Anupama talked about how she felt relieved that maybe this explains something for us. And Amit, if you could move on, that behind that rosy picture of privileges and what we assume amongst urban elite as saying this is the life we all want, there is another picture that emerged for us as we worked through our offering called Take Two. I'll talk to you about it in a bit, and it made us aware of a phenomena that we felt needs to be talked about, given language, and really start a dialogue around it. This is I won't say a completely a surprise, but the intensity and the frequency of what we discovered and the shades of it that we discovered has really attracted our attention in the last few batches that we ran, and so we felt it's time to write about it and start a dialogue around it, and that's what we intend to do to it today. You would move on. I mean, just to give you a quick context of Take Two, many of you here know about it, have been well-wishers and even contributors to us creating Take Two. People like Harish, Sonali, who have been great encouragement to both of us. So, what is really Take Two about? Take Two.
Also past participant Sanjay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
am I here?
I can see Srini there. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Srini. So there are tech tours here, as we call them, some of them. Uh, so yeah, Tech Two is a program was designed. It's been running for 4 years. It has had 70 participants, 9 batches, with mostly urban Indians. So which is why we have written about urban elite. And the program is to fully live and reimagine life and work. So it is based on our grounding, Amit's and my grounding, ISABs and process work that we've learned here. But it goes beyond that to really reimagine our life, reimagine who we are, and put it to work. So we actually talk about that the Take Two program helps make people's Take Two happen. It's not only about imagining it, but actually bringing it to life. The structure is that it has 6 days of in-person work over 1 month. As of today, the program exists in this form. And then it has follow-up 2 months of what we call as accountability and coaching calls. It's not only coaching, but we actually hold people accountable to keep the promises they make to themselves to make their life happen. It's semi-structure work where people come and deconstruct what's the narrative that has been running their life, what they have been running their life with. They take away the past, whatever is to be taken from the past, and imagine a future and construct a new narrative with it, and hence they start working on it to bring it alive. So that's really what Take Two is about. We are not going to focus anymore on Take Two, but more on the phenomena that emerged from Take Two, and hence why this paper and presentation. So what our intent today is to raise awareness about what we feel is a very contemporary phenomena. As Anupama was saying, that when we imagine oppression, we associate it with a certain class. We see a very clear oppressed and an oppressor. We see the dynamics between it. But here we are talking about a more contemporary phenomena that we've been noticing as people come to Take Two, which blocks individual and society's agency and potential. This is the block that actually most people, not most, every person that we've seen come to Take Two has to go beyond to create a new life for themselves, a new themselves really, and particularly among the urban Indians. So we'll present a few hypotheses that we have evolved based on some of the we'll present to you some of the case studies and also the hypotheses we've come up with. Also, we would invite you and we would like it to keep it somewhat interactive. In an hour, we may not be able to do a lot of it, but we'll still try. And just like Anupama was in touch with her own sense of possible oppression, if you can get in touch with your oppression, that'll be a great bonus for us and hopefully you as well. So that's really the paper and presentation that we are going through. Amit, help me here. But did we say that we will entertain questions as we go along, or do we want to keep them? Yeah, we will.
Couple of requests. That one, if you could keep your videos on if possible, so that we get to see you and know, so it becomes a bit more interactive. And if there's questions that come up, you may put on the chat or you can speak up to build some clarity. We hope to have also a longer session towards the end on the Q&A. Can't promise that though, with the time that's allotted to us. So having said that, should we move on, Sanjay?
Yes, and so we will give a reflective question and ask you to respond to it. We would request you to use the chat window to interact there. So with that, I'll hand it over to Amit to help to start deconstructing what is it when we call, what is this invisible oppression that we are even talking about?
So yeah, so it's 4 years since we have been working on this theme, and even before that, I've been working on this theme for around a decade. And the word oppression didn't strike us till early this year, late last year. We've been experiencing oppression of various kinds, but we never could give a word to it. We could not have a language to it. Only when we started seeing a pattern or a theme emerge, we realized there's an oppression. And I must also want to thank the ABS Summit, which for kind of forced us to conceptualize what we are experiencing. So for practitioners like us, summits like these are so critical. It helps us bring our experience and practice, which we tend to undermine, but try to put it in a frame here. So this paper has really helped us put a frame to it. So what is this oppression really? And if you go to deconstructing it, so before we get into the details of it, here's a question for all of you. The question is very simple. Have you ever felt curbed or caged in your life? There's something that you wanted to do, have been wanting to do, but I can see Nikita already raising her hands. You may raise your hands, you may put it in the chat window, yes or no, or maybe. Let's have a quick ones. I'm seeing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I assume you're raising your hand here to say that yes. Yeah, so many of us have experienced some sort of curbing or caging in our life. And is that curbing really oppression, or is it something else? So that's the exploration and discovery that we really went into. So we went to dictionary to find out what is really the meaning of this word oppression, and no better way than internet to go in and search for a dictionary, a meaning of word oppression. So oppression really means a sense of being weighed down in body and in mind, not just in the mind, but also in the body, and how they play a dance together. There's a sense of, I'm going down, and there's an oppression of spirit of some sort happening in various forms and shapes. So how does this show up? How does this weighing down show up? And we broke it down into behaviors, patterns, and identities behind them. So what are the behaviors that we've experienced? We saw that most people or many people kind of numbed their emotions. They're not even getting in touch with their emotions, getting so much caught up with the task and action that let go of completely of the emotions and what it may be telling them. There is an avoidance of discomfort and pain. Let me live my life quietly and let me not talk about what I am missing in life. Or there's other extreme. There's always an helpless complaining. I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that. Life is not as good as it should have been. But that's only in terms of limited expression. Or there could be extreme anger that you're going through, either holding an anger, immense anger within you, or it's an anger which comes out in various forms and shape. There is powerlessness and submission. Especially in Indian context, submission is the most common behavior. You submit to your elders, your parents, or significant others. One more interesting way it shows up is that wanting to avoid any uncertainty. We've been all trained and groomed to live a life of predictability, right from schooling to colleging to job, that any amount of unpredictability and clarity and lack of clarity gives discomfort. Quoting yesterday we were with Pradeep Khandwala, and he calls it allergy to ambiguity. And Harish, I remember you wrote in the chat window how much you use it. So really, it is to the extreme of allergy to have that word ambiguity. And so these are some of the behaviors that we've noticed how it plays out. In terms of patterns, very similar to the behaviors, overcompliance, kind of addiction to various kinds. Addiction, when I say, doesn't necessarily mean substance addiction. It can be including work addiction, including addiction to the patterns, being stuck to the mundaneness of our life, what we call as the 9-to-5 mundane stuckness. And the pattern, very important pattern, is really safety of choices. We stick to life choices which are predictable, which are known, which everybody else has taken. So that's very safe choices we end up making. Or there are some who don't know how to deal with their inner voice, and they reach a state of compulsive rebellion. They're going to rebel and fight everybody and anybody. But to us, both submissiveness and rebellion emerge from the same inner state, and can also lead to mental health challenges. What are the various identities that we have experienced people hold? And not just in the people who came to our program, but people in general when we talk. So some of the key identities that many of us hold are: A, good boy, good girl. I have to be the good boy, I have to be the good girl, I have to do what my parents have told, I have to do what the society has to tell, I have to look good. Log kya kahenge? So such an internalized identity that many of us hold, that we hence compliance becomes the only pattern that emerges. Or if you really want to do something beyond, then you say, but I don't have enough. I don't have, the most important one, especially in men, is I don't have enough money to do what I want to do. Or I don't have enough talent, I don't have skills, I don't know what to do. So either I don't have enough or I'm not good enough. I'm not really that capable to do anything. What we really have come to believe that all of us are enough to live a life which is fulfilled, a life of choice, purpose, and meaning. However, many of us have internalized the identity so much that I don't think I can live this life. I'm a lone warrior. I can't collaborate with others. If I have to do my way, I have to be on my own. From a gendered viewpoint, gendered identities have played a big role in people holding, weighing themselves down. And what have we discovered in this work is that the curse of patriarchy, as it's called, is equally held by men and women. It's held by women in many forms that we all know, through suppression and oppression of their identities, their being, their life, their wanting to go out and do something different, compliance to societal norms. But how does it impact men? It impacts men through the internalized identities of the provider and giver. I know, for instance, I'm tired, I don't want to work so hard and kill myself, but I have to. There's no way out, I have to. So that's the curse of patriarchy for men. So these gendered roles, which are unconsciously introjected and internalized by people, play out. So that's how the identities play out. So where does it all start from? As you all know, from many of you are here from ISAPS, the first unpeeling really starts at the self level. And we wanted to give a language to it. What is really oppressed? What is it that we are calling oppression? What is really oppressed is an inner voice of choice, choosing a life that I want, inner voice of freedom, that I want to do what I want to do, an inner voice of autonomy and self-expression. In fact, the oppression is not just of the doing, but also of the being. And that was really an eye-opener for us when we experienced oppression of the being. So the most common oppression, you may assume, is only of the doing. Don't do this versus don't do that. But it's also doing oppression of the being, who I truly am. So that's how the first unpeeling is about the oppression. I hope I've been able to clarify what this oppression really is by now.
Amit, I have a question.
Yeah, Lakshmi.
So the aspects of both oppression in aspect of behaviors, patterns, identities, as well as the unpeeling. I know probably I'm jumping the gun, seems to be very for most of the people. Is it doesn't seem to be very specific to the urban elite per se, or else is it just I'm seeing it that way? Because most people I feel have matching some patterns or the other here.
Indeed, Lakshmi. These operations, I'm not saying are exclusive to urban elite. What we are seeing in our work, we have discovered that it exists in urban elite too, which are supposed to be a privileged lot, and they've got everything. And we will be presenting a few case studies as we go ahead, where you'll get to see what kind of privilege we're talking about and why, and hence what kind of operation.
So Lakshmi, for example, one would imagine why would somebody who is bestowed with best of education and possibly economic status do helpless complaining? But we saw people doing that. Why would somebody who has been given a completely privileged life, not only in by their parents but by society and everyone else, and yet they feel they I'm not good enough? And that is what intrigued us, that I can understand somebody who, typically one would say that somebody who is marginalized due to their identity is marginalized or a behavior is not accepted because of the social system or social conditions they are in. But the surprise for us was that, just like Anupama said, that she felt that relief, there is a name to it, right? That I had all the privileges and yet I feel this. And that's really what one is talking about.
Yeah, Sanjay, you can take us through the next set of questions.
Yes, so here's an invitation now. Many of you said yes, you felt curbed and caged in life. Ask yourself, the curb you felt in your life before, does it show up or affect your life in any way now? If you think it's yes, then I'd like say yes in the chat window. Wonderful. I see 3 yeses.
Yeah, can we have as many people answering? We'll keep you involved in what is happening here.
Yeah. So Anupama says sometimes, yes, to some extent. Yeah. We have about 9 or 10 people responded so far, and all of them seem to say yes. So the curbing and caging that we have felt at some point in life does seem to show up later on. And if Amit, if you could bring up the next question. Would your life be different or better if that curve never happened to you? What do you think?
Different for sure, but better one doesn't know.
Good one, Arish. But do you wish sometimes it would be different?
I think it is also the fear of what that difference is going to bring. So what I really associated was that there is a known pattern, and the oppression that I am feeling will take me to an unknown path, and how ready really I am for that path.
Beautifully articulated, Anupama, and that we will later in the presentation bring that to you, that how breaking through that oppression, that's exactly what comes through, that the familiar somehow, even though painful, is better to live with rather than live with the uncertainty that Amit also mentioned earlier. So it could be different. Some of us are saying different. Chola said no, it may not be. And so we'll leave it to you to ask yourself that the curve, how does it show up, and if it would have made your life different or better. Well, the participants who came to take two different came in search of that, came in search of a better life, and this is where they landed up, that there is a certain curve that they felt which is affecting their life right now, and they could actually make it better or different if you pay attention to it. So if you would go on, Amit, to the next slide. So here are some cases of people who came in. So just to give you a flavor of it, here's the case of somebody who was studying at an Ivy League college. She had also done her engineering from one of the best colleges in the country. had actually two parents from the civil services, very privileged in all possible ways, brilliant in terms of her intellect, also her ability to very perceptive as a person, etc. And yet, when she came to take to saying, I just can't seem to be happy with the choices I'm making in life. I'm always struggling with, should I work in India? Should I work abroad? Should I do this? Should I go for the next course, or should I join a job? Should I get, I want to get married to this person, but I know that if I do, my parents will get upset. And all the intellect and all the confidence that she would display as a performer, in the college, will crumble in front of parents and societal pressure. And so she just frozen in in the ability to make her choices. Let's see another one. Here's somebody who's a 45-year-old person. He had he had a physical, he was specially abled. That disability he had from childhood. He had another brother, and all through his life he has received the messaging from his environment, his parents, that this is that somehow he was not good enough, or he was not enough, and that he had internalized so much that it was so difficult for him to be able to stand up for his choices within the family, even his work, because this was a joint family, business setup with a business family, and he found it extremely difficult to go beyond the bounds of the family, and carrying a lot of hurt from the past. Let's see another one. A 25-year-old engineer who had already a failed startup behind, was working in his job, was not satisfied with it, wanted to do another one, and there was this poignant story that he eventually came in touch with during the Take Two process, where he realized that at a young age he used to really tinker in the shed. He was a creator, and there was a particular point in time where his parents prohibited him from tinkering in the shed. And he got in touch with immense amount of the curbing and the caging that he felt at that moment, that his whole life's narrative became about, let me make socially compliant choices because that's what will get me the rewards. So he pursued going to an IIT, didn't make it. He pursued going to then he tried creating a startup with IITians. That also didn't work out. So there was this constant thing of labels and socially acceptable reward that he was after, and time and again he would keep giving up his own dreams, and that's why he came to Take Two. Another one, this 40-year-old successful media professional. She's the mother of one, very accomplished in her field, had mentored many other leaders in the media profession, very known in her field, and had a daughter. Because of her work, media, as you might know, is extremely demanding in terms of work hours. So she took the help of her parents to raise her child, and she got in touch with how much she had internalized the message from her parents, from the society, that she was pursuing her career over her child, and that made her so unsure about how to make choices in life, and carrying so much maternal guilt and shame because of that process. This was just to give you an idea of what the kind of oppressiveness that people felt. And Amit talked about a definition of oppression brought up earlier, and I think it was as important for us to be in touch with this so much. There is a second definition of oppression that throws up, that there is an unjust or cruel exercise of authority or power. And the interesting thing for us was that in all those behaviors, patterns, and identities that you saw, people got in touch with the fact that just like the 4 case studies that we talked about, but it was very hard for them to accept the fact that there has been an exercise of authority or power on me that is in some way cruel, is somewhere unjust, because how can it be? I'm so privileged. How can it be? Because these are my parents who did it. How can it be? Because they all, everybody around me wished so well for me. So if they did it, then they would have done it in their best intentions. So they found it extremely hard to accept this second definition of oppression. And if you would move on, so the second unpeeling that really happened is the self in the context, right? So the understanding that it's not that I have become the way I have because there is a certain context which did something, and I have taken it in, is the second unpeeling that happened. So they came up with saying, okay, I am oppressed because of, and these are the kind of reasons that they came up with. I'm oppressed because I have duties, I have liabilities, I have lifestyle entrenchment. So suddenly, from feeling the weighing down, the focus shifted to saying the context this is to me. So that's the kind of journey we saw in Take Two's most people doing.
I think the invitation for the group here is also to see where do you see this oppression coming to, and do you also relate to what the outside is doing?
We encountered many traumas. So family difficulties like financial difficulties, loss of a parent, separated parents, sexual identities. Those are the kind of things that started coming in. Parental neglect and criticism figured very large in many cases. In some cases, bullying, abuse, marginalization experiences because of a certain identity I carry. There are times when we discovered that people were forced to say, abandon a way of being, literally saying, you can't be this, you have to be this and behave like this. Be the good girl, be the good boy, fit in. Role identities that Amit talked about earlier. So yes, conditioning somebody mentioned. So yeah, so they found various reasons to say this is the condition, this is what conditioned me. And then of course social norms. I'm sure all of us have experienced social norms and know what it does to us. But the whole point of fitting in, having social and financial appropriate, the parental family pressure is what that they said has caused this to me. So here's an interesting exercise. I'm going to now do something that we try doing in Take Two, and we would invite you to do this for yourself. A lot of you said yes, that curb or caging happened for me, and yes, it affects my life, and maybe my life could be different or better because of that. So what we ask people to eventually do is in some way name their oppression. And I'll give you some examples. So for example, when we talked about the Ivy League college person who had the privilege background, she basically got in touch. She named her oppression as measuring up to socially appropriate expectations. Now these are not the word that she used, but this is essentially the meaning of what she was saying, right? Saying that my oppression is that. The person that we talked about, the businessman who had a physical disability, he had basically internalized the message that being physically disabled means somehow being lesser. And since I am less, I can't do more. I'm not good enough, or I am not enough. The 25-year-old entrepreneur, failed entrepreneur who went on eventually, and interestingly, after Take Two, he's had a very successful startup, which is very well funded and doing very well. But his naming was that I was prohibited from experimentation. And I was asked to comply with socially rewarding choices, so hence I went ahead and kept doing that. So the prohibition became almost like I can't do this, right? I can't try. And the last one that we talked about is that there was the gendered social shaming. How can you be, as a woman, how can you put your ambition before parenting? So I literally remember, and pardon my French here, that I still remember very vividly that she was crying on the last day, and she looked up, with a lot of rage, and it was almost like Durga like kind of a thing, where she put up her middle finger like that and said, this is what I want to say to the world. I made the choices I wanted to make, and that's what I'm going to live now. Now that's the delight of seeing take twos happen. But right now, I'd like you to bring you back to take a pause, and can you name your oppression, the curbing that you felt, the curbing that still affects your life, and if you can put it, share
Yeah,
it.
Amit, it will be helpful if we show the previous categorization because that gives an idea that kind of has a more detailed list. The previous slide, can we have it?
I can bring that up, but it would be nice if you can give it your own words, Lakshmi.
Okay, sure.
And if you can share it with us on the chat window, that'll be really nice. Thank you, Gurinder. Not worth it.
How dare you have your own script of life? You have to follow ours.
Wow, powerful, Sukhi.
Comply else you don't exist. That's very, very powerful, Lakshmi. Gender-based social expectations, especially as a parent. Yeah, Nidhi, we just spoke about that.
Wow, Raji, this is enough for you. My God, that's like no more. I can't do anything more. Yeah.
Be a good girl. Yeah, play your defined roles. Be the caring woman, Lalita. Lovely.
You can't fail, Mandeep.
Yeah, it's a very hard one. I can imagine, Mandeep.
You were not wanted. You're now here, so comply.
Oof.
Gosh.
I'm actually having goosebumps when I'm reading all of this.
Stay trapped. Hierarchy within family, yes. The birth order, the gender. If you're dark skin, you're no good. Wow. And we may like you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just overwhelmed right now and reading all this. If you belong to an oppressed caste, you're not human being. Yeah.
Oh, you. You're better than many. What else do you want? That's really an oppression through the privilege, Nidhi.
Gender norms and gender expression, yes. and you can handle anything. Wow, it's complete denial of vulnerability. White people cannot be thieves. You can't be a rainbow in a world of black and white. Thank you, Ankit. Yes, can relate to that one.
As you can see, all of this can be really overwhelming. Black is a bad omen, my goodness. I'm really getting two thoughts now, Sanjay, what to do. Kind of sharing that output.
Yeah.
I want to really acknowledge and thank all of you for being so open and vulnerable and sharing whatever you put in the chat window.
Yeah, feeling overwhelmed for two reasons, Amit. One is, of course, what's coming through.
The content of it, yeah.
But what I'm also glad about, I'm feeling overwhelmed, is our whole attempt at writing this paper and doing this work is to give language to it. And to have people name it for themselves is giving language to what you are going through. So thank you for doing that, because once the word is out there, you can do something about it.
Also that, you're feeling safe enough to put it down and give words to it in this space and put it in the chat. That's also very touching. Okay. Should we move on, friends?
Yes. Can we just take a second to be in silence and read through and absorb all of this? That's an invitation to all of us. Honestly, I didn't expect this much to happen, so I'm also feeling.
May I invite all of us to maybe take a deep breath. Ground ourselves in acknowledging what's happening here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have just 15 more minutes.
Amit, over to you.
Yeah. So one of the things that we really were curious and intrigued, why does this operation remain invisible? Why does it always show up like this beautiful peacock? And why isn't the operation that's behind that visible? Why isn't it known? Why, as Sanjay said, why doesn't it even have a language for this? I think the first and foremost thing we realize is most people are unaware of their operation of the inner voice. Is really the operation is so internalized and so much introjected that it's just normal. I mean, it's like many years back, women, for instance, didn't even know that this is what they're going through the operation. It's just a part of life. The lower caste people would say that is normal for a Dalit to experience whatever they experience, because that's how life is. So yeah, one of the key reasons we found is that people are unaware, there's no language to it. So what keeps the operation invisible? Two levels, one at an individual level and the other at a societal level. At an individual level, really, as Sanjay was saying earlier, there's no oppressor. Some of you put it in the chat window, you got everything. So and they are my well-wishers, my close ones. So they can't be oppressors. The other is you're a privileged lot. You got a job. People will die to get where you are. You got a job. You got a family. You got all the privileges of the urban elite. So how can you have an oppression to that? your own achievements and possessions. Once you reach somewhere in life, you've attained a certain set of standard for yourself, and that's holding your identity in such a way that you're a successful person in society. So that in itself becomes an anchor of pulling you down. Is what we also call as the trap of success. There's a sense of obligation to others, and even not acknowledging becomes a coping mechanism. That if I acknowledge that there is an oppression, I won't know what to do with these feelings. Whom do I go to? There's nobody around me whom I go and talk to these things. So also a lack of really a social structure and to share your vulnerabilities. And especially for men, it becomes even more harder not having such communities around. So that's what aids in keeping the oppression invisible.
Can I add a point here? What just came to me?
Yeah, sure. Who's speaking? I can't see.
That's me, Kavita.
Hey, Kavita.
So,
yeah.
While I was reading this, yes, it seems to fit, but I think there is this whole idea about, whatever everybody has gone through, let's say in a small or a big measure, to call it oppression seems like, you're not being oppressed like those people. You're not being oppressed like the poor people or XYZ, which is your stories, like there are books read on the pedagogy of oppressed. So to associate all of this with the word oppression and say, I'm an oppressed person, to own that up itself is, I think some may do it easily, but that in itself makes it, I think, even more invisible. It's like, no, I'm not oppressed. I mean, they're not so bad.
Yeah.
So maybe that also could be one of the things.
Indeed, Kavita.
Actually, may I?
Yeah, Ramesh, go ahead.
Actually, this oppressor who was outside, if we look at Eric Berne, this oppressor has got right inside my head as a critical parent.
Yeah.
Now there is no oppressor outside. Actually, all that oppressors are inside me in my own critical parent ego state, having made me an adapted child or a rebellious one, because both possibilities are there. And that's how I am understanding it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ramesh. That indeed plays a role when we grow up and there's no visible oppressor outside. I'm seeing hands up from Jyotsna.
So when we talk about this oppression, the other thing is when the moment somebody accepts, like especially those who are well-to-do and who are in those privileged category, there is an immediate question that comes to that, the fear of losing all these privileges. Like, it's psychological, but then it also impacts like, am I going to lose all these privileges and be at par with the non-privileged category because I'm also expressing this. So that fear also doesn't let these thoughts come nearer.
Hello.
So maybe that's how I am thinking.
Yeah, true, Jyotsna. It's like, holding on to the possessions, and if I speak out the operations, I'll have to let go. That's the risk and fear.
It also comes...
I see Gurinder holding his hand up.
Yes. So as a child, the outside environment of the home is always difficult for a child. So the safest thing he feels is at home. So what happens when there are some problems outside the home? So when he comes back home, he always feels safe with the parents, and he cannot imagine his own parents as the oppressors. So that is where in the early childhood age, I think we are not able to see that oppression. And in the later on stages, I think when we realize we were like oppressed. So that is one of the reasons we don't see the near ones, the loved ones in the safest environment as the oppressors.
Yeah. So yeah, as we said, there's no visible oppressor there. I see many hands up, and
Yeah.
Sanjay, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Sushma was going to say something.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that is that many times this oppression comes wrapped up with love.
Yeah.
And that's a bigger one. You know, under this garb of love, so then the recipient doesn't recognize and doesn't become aware of how it is oppressing. So I thought I'd just add.
Yes, Sushman, that's the normalization in the family or in the social space we do. ये तो तुम्हारी वो है, ये तो तुम्हारा वो है, you know, how could they? Yeah. Yeah, Harish, you had your hand
Yeah,
up.
no, I was actually building on what Kavita said and Ramesh was saying. Is the choice of word oppression needs to be revisited from the context and examples which you have given, for the simple reason that even if I look at the definition which Amit you put it, so oppression as a word indicates somebody outside and the power related thing, the power distance is there. Whereas several of these examples, if you look at it, and those of us who have responded here, many of us are in the power positions. We are heads of families, we are in charge of our lives, and yet we are feeling this. So therefore, my question whether oppression is the right word for it.
I would still stick to that, Harish, because when the curbing happened, you were not in authority or power. And that's what has been internalized.
And even in the experience that we've had, people who are head of the family or earning middle-aged men still feel an oppression because the family pressures of being in a particular way, being in a social ranking at a particular level is compelling them to be that way. And it is an oppression which may have never been expressed that way, but it still is an oppression.
Transactional analysis refers to it as scripts.
Yeah, so that's an internalized
or injunctions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see Sukhi's hand for some time now.
Yeah, Sukhi, please.
And then again.
Such a beautiful presentation, and I'm really, my heart is warm because of what you are presenting here. But there are certain concerns I have. You know, something is uncomfortable inside of me, which I want to try to touch and express. Is that use of the word oppression is making me uncomfortable in this context, because it kind of then waters down the true oppression, the oppression of caste, the oppression of class, the oppression of ableism, the oppression of the majority on the minority. These are places of oppression for me, and these are places of deep concern. So somewhere when we are putting all these things as oppression, then I feel कि कहीं हम लोग पता नहीं कुछ गड़बड़ तो नहीं कर रहे हैं. So that is one concern I have. So I am open. I'm not saying that ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. And the other thing is oppression के साथ victimhood भी बहुत जुड़ा हुआ है. You know, oppression hua, but then I got stuck in my victimhood and all that happened. So in many of these oppressive things that happened with me, I broke through those and I walked out of that oppressive minds thing that I had, and I got myself free of it. But there are chances that I in turn become the oppressor also. I mean, it's an unbroken cycle. So that is equally important. And as an urban elite, how oppressive I can be. And I think the oppression in the rural areas is actually mind-blowing. So yeah, so this whole thing about oppression, calling this oppression, and what happens to the real oppression then?
Yeah, and Sukhi, I think I hear you that there may be a sense of appropriating a word in here. That's not our intent, but also our intent is
Nagendra has been wanting to say something for a long time.
Ramesh, can we just complete what's going on? What's your impatience? I don't know.
Yeah, that's not the intent here, but at the same time, oppression is the way you described it, Sukhi. It's across classes, it's across genders, it's across, right? Here it is within a family, within a certain class, within a certain boundaries. And that's the difficulty. So maybe there is a better word out there. I would agree with that. But right now, I think for us, it was as just like what happened just now when people put in their oppression, it's as overwhelming to see that what it can do to individuality of people. Nagendra, and you are on mute.
That's right. I was very curious to join your session. I chose to step into your room because of the topic. Though I'm comfortable with you, but because the topic was very attractive, because I always felt oppressed as a child. And I always kept seeing the oppressing world around me as a little weak, timid school child with the bullying around, with the going with the taller people, with the dominant, strong sisters around. So I have experienced oppression throughout in earlier stage. As I grew, I saw the world is more worried about the oppression outside, not within me, but outside the upper caste, lower caste, social. So the whole sociological context became so important that the context within me lost into oblivion. I couldn't work on that. But maybe having listened to, and also I got reinforced this hypothesis that most of the responses coming in the chat seem to be bringing more of a social context of various kinds. Because there is an oppressor within me and there is a oppressed child within me. I am the oppressor. I am the oppressed. And I have yet not resolved the dilemma. Sometimes I oppress within myself my own feelings. I just live with that. And I claim that I have learned to live with the misery. I have learned to live with the agonies. I have learned to live with the deprivation. I have learned to live with the humiliation. I have learned to live. So I claim to have the ability, and that gives me a sense of comfort and maybe a self-acceptance and cope with self-rejection. But the fact is, the oppressor within me continues to haunt, and the oppressed within me as a child continues to sulk. How do I deal with that within myself was the one aspect which somehow I missed being discussed. And that was one curiosity I came to your session. I enjoyed because the startup leaders and entrepreneurs I have come across. So at one level, I was thoroughly enjoying because the cases were giving a lot of mirror of hundreds of entrepreneurs that I have worked with. But I, as a social entrepreneur myself, there is a pressure within me and oppressed within me, and I don't know how to cope with that. Yet I'm coping with a great sense of self-acceptance. So that's where I am.
Sanjay, 30 seconds to wrap up because we have 1 minute to close.
Sure. Here's how we will wrap it up quickly. So there is a whole, you can read our paper. There's a whole thing of how do people break through this oppression. And Ramesh, thank you for bringing in that concept that it's actually the internalized oppressor. They confront them within themselves as they go through the Take Two journey. And what comes through the Take Two journey is the shift saying, I was oppressed as a child, as this happened to me, but to recognize that I have internalized it. And then to also own up that a story has run my life right now, interestingly, paradoxically gives us the hope that I can create a new story of my life, and that's how Take Twos are born. Amit, if you could quickly shift to the next slide. Yeah, so why we believe this, it's important to do this work is this, maybe Amit just bring up the whole thing. Yeah, that there is silence of this, the kind Nagendra talked about, I don't talk about, I've learned to self-manage it. So this silence leads to more shame and guilt. The internalization gets further entrenched. You say there is no way out, there is no challenge back to the system. So as much as, we believe that the kind of oppression, Sukhi, that you talked about, that to fight that oppression outside, first we need to fight the oppression inside and speak up about it. And when that owning up happens is when we can change the systemic and context toxicity. So for us, Take Two has become a place of creating change makers who own up their oppression and break through it, and hence create hope not only for themselves but many around them. And that's why we believe this work is important, and it's important to make this oppression visible. With that, Anupama.
Yes, thank you very much, Sanjay and Amit. And right now, I can say Dil Mange More. It is a sense of incompletion because the way you guys presented and everybody opened up, I'm sure we will need more of this and a Take Two in for this session as well. So thank you very much for this presentation. And after the break, we will see you in Idea Splash in Sangam. And let's move in there. Thank you.
I want to really thank each one of you for being here and choosing to be here and sharing the way you have shared. Really want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's acknowledge the presenters.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
This is 45, right?
Yeah. The second session, the session is in Sangam at 4:45. Yeah.
Ramesh, you're on mute if you're speaking.
I said, is this Sangam?
No, this